All right, everybody. Welcome to our first Global Connection series of the fall 2020. Welcome. If you're watching us live, thank you for being here. If you're watching a recording, thank you for doing that. We will be doing this series every 2 weeks to try and connect with some awesome people around our St. Thomas community who can help you, the new international students, just get some tips and tricks about how to take advantage of life in the United States. And that is why we're doing it. Today, we're joined by Dr. Paola Ehrmantraut, who will be talking about her experience as both an international student and a professor here at St. Thomas. Dr. Ehrmantraut, tell us more about yourself and the path you took to being here.
Well, Ozzy, thank you for having me. You know, I love doing this. I love connecting with our international students because I was an international student myself. I'm originally from Argentina, Cordoba, and I came to the US to do grad school, for grad school. I studied at Washington University in St. Louis. I did a master's and a PhD in literature, in Hispanic literature. And then I continued and did a graduate certificate in women, gender, and sexuality studies. My research is at the intersection of those two fields. My research analyzes masculinities and gender in Latin American literature. So it's very interdisciplinary. And then I had my first job here at St. Thomas, and here I am.
Well, this was your first teaching assignment?
Yes, it was.
Wow.
And I teach classes of Latin American culture and Spanish language, but I am also, because of this, intersection of my work, I am also the director of Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies here at St. Thomas. And I'm very interested in all things gender. My students know. Yeah.
So how long have you been at St. Thomas already?
Oh, 11 years. Just
Oh,
like
wow.
that. What happened?
Jeez, yeah,
I know.
That's quite a good enough time to get used to St. Thomas. You've seen a few buildings go up, right?
Some go down, some go up. I've seen it all. Yes, things have
That's
changed.
awesome.
Some stay the same. It's all.
Yes. Well, thanks so much. Yeah. So for a lot of international students, one of the biggest thing that they talk about is how sometimes stressed out or maybe even scared of talking to American professors during their first semester, or even some, Michelle will say, even now as a graduate student, talking to professors can be scary. So tell us, do you have any advice about that? What's your thoughts about that? Are you all scary?
I don't think I'm scary at all, but I am not a student, so I don't know. No, I think that in general, in many cultures, there is a lot more. I think the relationship with the professor is very different. It tends to be very distant. It tends to be very reverential. It tends to be, very formal in those areas. But here in the U.S., professors were always trying to communicate, and communicating a lot with our students is part of our job. So we set aside our office hours, which are times that are set every week, for students of any of our courses. Just jump in to our Zoom now, or if we're in an actual office, to just come in and talk to us about the class, a question they may have, a clarification about an assignment. So communication is seen as something that is in the system, built in the system, and that students are going to participate in that communication throughout the semester.
So do you think?
Professors are very much available,
Okay.
via email, via phone of their office, and Zoom now, or Teams, Office Teams. There are many multiple ways to reach out to your professors, and they're waiting for students to reach out to them.
So you're saying that if I'm a student, I'm not gonna bother the professor if I go into their office hours because I don't wanna be on the bad side of the professor, you know?
The opposite. And Ozzy, I'm gonna say this, sometimes, I make the joke like my office hours are my lonely hours because not all of my students take advantage of that. And I'm like, I'm lonely, where are they? But it is, I think, especially for international students, this becomes a good strategy. If you're an international student, we're dealing with a lot, we're adapting to a new culture a lot. Some of us would have like, the language barrier to deal with. So sometimes you're in class and there is an opportunity to participate. It passes by. And then like that evening you go, oh my goodness, of course I could have said this and that. Use the office hour to make that comment to your professor. That's a perfect, you can reach out to your professor and say, oh, you know what, I love that discussion we had in class, and you know what, thinking about it, I thought about this. That is a perfect use for the office hour, and I use that helps us international students to show that sometimes that silence is that we're thinking and processing, because we're processing a lot, not just the content of the class. So this works for us as a place where we can, okay, come back to it and make sure that the professor can see that we are just as engaged. It's just that sometimes for us, we're processing. So yeah, I would use office hours regularly.
And it's my understanding that all professors have office hours, like that is a
Yes,
requirement.
yes. We are required to set aside time every week where we don't do anything else but wait for our students to come with their questions, their comments, clarifications, like, Profe, this assignment, I wasn't sure. This test, I didn't know if it is next week. What do I really need to study? Or can you review with me, Profe? Like, all of those are valid uses of office hours.
It's
So
awesome.
it's a great resource, especially for international students.
That's really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So so obviously like we're for students, the relationship with a professor is something that is hard to kind of navigate. Like
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
I know sometimes in some countries, professors are like, there's a big difference between a professor and a student. They're like, professor here, student is here.
Mm-hmm.
We don't look them up in the eyes.
I know.
But they're, I'm exaggerating a little bit. But
Oh, but
what
it
about
was
here?
like that. It was like
I,
that for me in my undergrads. I'm telling you, like if I wanted to talk to a professor, number one, I come in Argentina, we have these ginormous public universities. The
mm-hmm,
classes are ginormous. The professor never learned our names.
mm,
We didn't even have their emails to contact them. You were on your own, right? So it's a very different situation. It's here, there is a closeness and a kind of collaboration that
mm-hmm.
goes into taking a class with your professor.
So can you be like best friends, buddies with your professors, or what?
No,
What's the relationship?
and that's a great question because, we can be friends, but this is a professional relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't have to be hostile, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not buddy buddies, right? Because this is a professional relationship. And
Mm-hmm.
this is great for everyone to understand the difference, because what we're really doing is modeling for our students what they will have to do once they get their degrees and enter the workforce, and they are productive, brilliant professionals. So this is the way. So we can have a closeness, we can collaborate, we can help each other, but that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that you're going to start an email saying, hey, no,
Mm-hmm.
dear Professor Ehrmantraut, blah, blah, blah. I always tell my students, I am Dr. Ehrmantraut. I will be Paola, my first name, when you graduate. That's the deal.
Mm-hmm. So you do advise that to students to ask kind of, oh, how do you want to be called or something like that.
Yeah.
It's important too. Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
important, and it's important to always remind yourself that sometimes, for me personally, as an international student, it was a little bit like disconcerting, because you see some things that are very informal.
Mm-hmm.
But then the communication in terms of email writing and addressing, it becomes almost like more framed like a professional relationship. For instance, I would see, and I've made this example before, but I would see here students, I'm talking in the US, not in St. Thomas particularly, but in my classes back at WashU, I would see students showing up with flip-flops.
Mm-hmm.
In Argentina, that would never happen because we would show up to class with basically, the best clothes you had, you used to go to class. So, we would never show up. So it looks very informal. So then you may think, oh, well, then everything is informal. No. Sometimes the people, your classmates may choose to be more informal in their appearance, but that doesn't mean that the relationships with professors and other staff in the university is not professional.
That's good.
It's a learning.
So,
Yeah.
oh yeah,
Learning
absolutely.
experience.
It's always learning. Every professor is also very
Yeah.
different too. Yeah. So let's flip it. From your perspective as a professor here, what are some of the qualities you look for in a student, especially not necessarily an international student, but what are some of the things you're like, okay, this is how a student can show interest or respect? Like, what do you look for in a student?
Mm-hmm. It's the same as you're having a conversation with someone. You want them to follow, you want them to be engaged with the topic you are discussing. You want them to ask questions if they have them. Um, Sometimes I take a pause and like, okay, do you have any questions about this? It's a complete silence. I'm like, there must be a question, I'm pretty sure. So I think the expectation that students participate and they're vocal and they bring their perspective and they talk in class, that's very important here in the US. They don't expect students to be quiet. They expect students to talk and they, to participate pretty intensely.
So next question. So we talked a little bit about what are some of the positives you look for in students.
Yeah.
What are some things that you don't really like to see from the student? What are some things that like, or maybe you and other professors like you kind of, what are something that's like, this is not a good sign?
Exactly. We're looking for red flags, basically. And red flags are a student that doesn't show up for class, or a student that doesn't let us know what's going on, why it's going to miss a class. So it is part of this institutional culture to send an email to your professor if you're going to miss a class for whatever reason. And you don't have to disclose all the details of that, but you do have to let the professor know that that's going to happen. And in the same email, you should always explain how are you going to get the notes of that day, or and if it is not clear, you should ask your professor, okay, I'm going to miss this class. I have a conflict with another activity. However, I'm going to get the notes and I will go to your office hours to make sure I don't fall behind. Perfect, right? But a student that just doesn't show up, that's a red flag. A student that return things late, and then when you say, oh, why did you turn in late? Oh, because I didn't know the assignment directions. We have office hours, we have an email. Those questions come before the deadline, not after. So time management and attendance, I think, are the the main areas that we're looking to evaluate.
And I know none of the students present here, nor any of the students watching this video, will ever do something as bad. But I've heard of some people doing things like cheating and copying. No, not our students, obviously. They're perfect. But
sometimes what can happen,
right?
yes, academic honesty is a very important topic to get as much information as you can, especially as an international student. I think that not knowing, it's not an excuse for it to happen. So it's very important that you check. If you have a doubt, the same rule applies. am I quoting directly? Am I giving credit to the person that had this idea? I will check with my professor, or I will check with the writing center, or I will check with my tutors if there are tutors in the department where you're writing or presenting this material. So there's always like a whole network of people that can help you catch this before it's a problem. But plagiarism usually comes, especially in undergrad students, together with a lack of time management. So
Mm-hmm.
students that tend to do plagiarism, to plagiarize a paper is because they're working on almost, late paper and they just get desperate, and that's how it happens. So this idea of starting our assignments early, getting time for consultation, visiting your professor office hours, all those steps is like an insurance
Mm-hmm.
against plagiarism.
Yeah.
And
And just
to
for
be,
our
yeah.
some of our very new students, can you give us an example of what plagiarism? What do you mean by plagiarism?
Usually is when you use somebody else's idea
Mm-hmm.
or text without acknowledging that person. So you make it look like it's your own idea or
Mm-hmm.
words. And that is not honest. That is a
Mm-hmm.
lack of academic honesty. And as an institution, we take that extremely seriously, because if
Mm-hmm.
we, if we cannot assure that, we all participate in this academic honesty, then the degree you will receive will have no value,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah. So yes, as you said earlier, always ask your professor before
Yeah,
you,
and there could
do
be
the.
things of like, okay, there are some times where you are working with different materials. Like I have a class where we work with Instagram posts and ads and
Mm-hmm.
things that are not traditionally a text, that you quote. So it's like, how do I quote this? How do I? So sometimes, and there are ways in which you can acknowledge the work of others. It's different than just cutting and pasting and who produced this idea, who produced this post, who came up with this image. You need to acknowledge that in your paper. It doesn't take value away from you.
Mm-hmm.
You can see yourself as a curator in a museum. You put this together. That has a value. We're not
Mm-hmm.
asking you to paint all the paintings in the museum. We're asking you to put them together, which is different. So that lowers also the expectation of having to come up with completely original ideas. That's not what the academic research we do. So
I like that analogy. We're not asking you to paint to paint. I like that. That's pretty fun. That's a
right, we're
good
not
one.
asking you to be Picasso and whatnot. No, just but bringing it
Just,
together. Yeah, yeah.
just don't pretend to be Picasso, right? That
That never works. We can
never
see
works. We
it.
know, right? We know.
Oh, we can see it from a mile away. That's
Mm,
the other thing, you know.
yeah,
Yeah,
you're
as
all very
professors,
smart.
no, it's not gonna go smoothly. And we
Mm,
even use software that alerts us to this. So the
mm,
moment we turn
right.
something in, we see it. Yeah, the software alerts us. So this is not something, oh, I may have a suspicion. We come back with a percentage and a report, and it's like, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's, technology works for that. So we use it.
Can help.
Yeah, yeah.
So my last question for you is a little more of kind of looking back, maybe as your path as an international student, as someone who's worked for quite a few years with international students. What what is some of the advice you have that for international students to make the best of their time here in the United States?
Hmm. Hmm. I think that one piece of advice that I have for my international students, for you, is to think of your time in the university, as we talked, as a professional opportunity. That's what it is. And number two, think of the relationships you build, because that is your network here in the US. And that is very important. That has a value that, is something that you cannot buy. This you have to build. So the relationship with your professor, getting to know your professor, presenting yourself in a way that is respectful, responsible, and productive. All this, that professor can be the one that writes a recommendation letter for you for your next step.
Mm-hmm.
That can be the
Mm-hmm.
reference you put in your first job in America or abroad. So these are very important connections. So don't look at just this semester. Think about it a bigger picture, and look at yourself, how you're building these relationships, people that will be able to put a good word for you. That is also very valuable. And then you will see the importance of showing up, doing your work, visiting your office hours, because relationships are time and attention. So you need to do the work. And I think that is very important. I would have never landed such a great job if it wouldn't have been for my advisor, my professor that guided me and helped me and wrote a letter of recommendation and said, you know what, I know she will do a good job. Here's my word. That counts a lot in this system. This is how this
Absolutely.
American system works. So
Oh yeah.
the sooner you understand how that works and how you can, because American students understand that, so they already
Mm-hmm.
know this. You
Yeah.
in the system need to understand it to take advantage of it and be at the same, play level play field, I guess. Yeah, that would be
Awesome.
my piece of advice.
That's a very good advice to work with. Yes, as a student myself, my advisor, my international advisor, was the one who gave me the recommendation to be where I am now. So there's definitely a lot of value to that.
I mean, we can go down the office suite where I am, and everybody. That's how we all got our position. So it
Mm-hmm.
is important. I still have students um, this summer that are Profe. Can I put you as a reference? Yes, of course. You have been an excellent student. I will take that call, and and let your employer know that you are responsible and an asset to their company, of course. So this is part also of our job, helping our students move forward. And
Mm-hmm.
so, but if we don't know you, somebody calls me, oh, do you know? I can't say anything bad or good. I don't know that person.
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
problem. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Ehrmantraut, thank you so much for your time. That was fantastic. For those of you who are watching live, I'm going to give you some time to ask some questions to Dr.
Oh.
Ehrmantraut on your own. But for those of us watching the video, I'm going to be saying thank you for watching.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will post this video. Well, no, you're watching it already posted. Ignore that comment. But we will take your questions. If you do have questions,
Sure.
please do email them directly to oiss@stthomas.edu, and we'll be happy to pass on those questions to Dr. Ehrmantraut in the future, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
figure out a way to get you back those answers. But
Absolutely. And Ozzy, as
mhm.
always, I always tell, if you're watching this video later, or for the students that are watching it now, take down my name. Send me an email. You have a question later, I want to hear about it. I will answer. So please let me know.
All
Um,
right then.
of course. And yes, absolutely. I've been there, and I know there are questions that from one international student to the other, I can answer. I can do it. So let me know.
And with your permission, you'll find Dr. Paola Ehrmantraut's
Yes,
email right below. Right?
please use it. Don't be shy. Please use it. I'm not
Awesome.
gonna fight.
All right. Well, thank
Thank
you very much
you.
for watching us. See you all later.